Hi everyone, I'm Krista Orejudos from Ground Zero Radio, and today I'm here with the one and only famous artista, Sara Porkalob naman. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hey y'all, my name is Sara Porkalob. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a Pisces sun, Capricorn rising,
The astrology.
Taurus moon. So in many ways that explains everything. I'm a first generation Filipina, Chinese, Hawaiian American, and I'm so glad to be here today.
Guys, I'm like so starstruck still. So bear with me. And there's some like ambiance in the back because we're at the Vera Project. And if you're here, you already know there's always like music and just lively artistic, creative juices flowing. But yeah, for people who don't know Sara, she is amazing. She is the creator of the Dragon trilogy, and we're gonna dive right into this interview with like why a one woman play and like what inspired you to create it.
Yeah, definitely. So, as Krista mentioned, I'm known largely for my original work, my original plays and scripts. I work primarily in theater, about to branch out into film and TV, which is pretty freaking cool. I've written a trilogy of plays about my family called The Dragon Cycle, one play for each generation, each play focused on a central female protagonist and her specific hero's journey. The first in the cycle, Dragon Lady, is a story about my grandmother when she was a cabaret singer and a gangster in the Philippines, and what it was like for her to immigrate to America and suddenly become a single mom of 5 kids and dealing with white supremacy, right? And the fact that she had to let go of all of her dreams so she could be there for her kids as best as she could. It's a cabaret musical, so we have live music. I play 32 characters, and I often will have my real grandmother show up at the very end of the play in a very special cameo performance. Dragon Mama, part 2 in the cycle, is a solo show where I play 24 characters, and that's about my mom, who is the eldest of 5 siblings, who, like many immigrant daughters, had to become a surrogate mom to her siblings because my grandmother was out working all the time. She was grinding, right? And that story really focuses on mental health and my mother's experience as like a young woman of color who discovered she was queer and how she became a mother before she even really knew how to be a young adult. And what it was like to break cycles of generational trauma so that I could live my life being an artist and a storyteller. And Dragon Baby, the third and final in the cycle, isn't a solo show. It's a 12-person, 2-act, genre-defying musical, and you'll be able to catch that in a couple of years. So back to your question, like why a one-woman show? This all really started 10 years ago in 2012 when I was a senior at Cornish College of the Arts, and I was about to graduate, and I was like so terrified and so angry and so sad because I was hit with this reality that I was about to transition into the real world of theater, and the fact that it felt so white, that my education felt so white, and that I was given a set of tools that ultimately didn't really feel personal. They didn't feel complete to me as like a brown, queer daughter of immigrants who like grew up in America and like poor America. And I was like, wait a minute, how am I going to be a storyteller professionally if I don't even know what types of stories I want to tell? If I wasn't even given any plays, any stories that looked like me or my family, I didn't have any teachers that looked like me or my family. So I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna just do it myself.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
my senior year, I decided to sign up for the scariest class on the curriculum like schedule, and it was solo performance. And I was like, well, if it's solo performance, I can't really hide behind anybody on stage. And it was all about creating your original work. So I was like, okay, that's really scary to me, but it makes sense that that's where I should start if I want to figure out what kind of storyteller I want to be. I should start with my own goddamn stories. And that really sparked the journey that led me to where I am today. And it's really the gift that keeps on giving when I constantly investigate not only myself and my journey, but every other person who made me who I am today. And that starts with my family.
Oh my God. I have no words. I'm speechless. But backtracking on what you said of you enrolling in that solo class, and just now you're like able to play 32 characters plus, or like 24. My friend and I went to go watch Dragon Lady about like your grandma, right? And one thing that we kept talking about when it was intermission was like how clear you can switch like characters from like, yeah, your grandma to yourself to your mom. What's that process like? Because like everyone can, personally, like I have this running joke with my friend of just like, yeah, like gotta play all the characters. But when I saw you, I was like, that's literally playing all the characters.
I would say the process behind that has many layers. The first and most obvious layer to me is just practice. In many ways, I'm a technician and I'm an athlete. So similar to how an engineer knows how to put things together, right? Or an athlete knows how to train their body so they can achieve their specific objective, whether that be running faster, lifting heavier. We all need to practice. So that's that first level, is I'm just practicing all the time between my character transitions. And that is fueled by specifically my body, my voice, and my mask, which is just what my face is doing. So by just changing those things, I can play 34 characters, and you and the entire audience will know exactly who I'm playing without any costume changes, right? Or any like props or anything. So that's that first level. It's just like pure technique. Just practice. Anybody can practice, right? Feel me? You just got to keep doing it. That's how you get better. The second level is I have the wonderful privilege of knowing a lot of these very real people that I play. So it isn't like I'm making things up out of nowhere, being like, I'm going to imagine a character that I've never met before and make them a full 3D human being. Nah, I know these people. I grew up with these people. I think what's most important is that I love them and I care about them. And it's really that love and that care that informs my process on how to bring their characters to life on stage, whether that be them at 40 years old or them at 5 years old. It's that emotional knowledge and that specific like familial care that I have for them that helps body the character. And then the third level is relationships. Because I know these people and because they know each other, I have to investigate why people are saying what they're saying, how they're saying it, when, how that changes moment to moment, even night to night in my performance. And that's really the variable that's always growing and changing. Like if you were to see every single performance that I've ever done, you would see something different every night, because my plays about my family are about real people who are alive and changing and growing. So it doesn't make any sense to me to do the same thing every night, you know? It's almost like a disservice to them and their journey as well as mine.
She mentions family, which is very important in Filipino culture. And this dives right into our next question of like, what's your like relationship with your grandma and mom? Because in Dragon Lady, there's obviously some tension between them. Like there's that generational trauma. And I think that was like one theme that kept reoccurring in Dragon Lady. So I kind of wanted you to like address that, or like why you decided to implement it.
Yeah, you know, I think it's very common across cultures, right? To have this tension between the parents and the children. Yes. And then when the grandchildren are born, you know, all of a sudden their parents are like, wait a minute, why are you so different acting this way towards your grandchild?
Yes.
Why are you so sweet? Why are you pretending to be so nice all of a sudden? Do you know what I mean? So that dynamic has always been present. My mother is the eldest of her siblings. And of course, like she's so much like my grandmother. They were constantly butting heads. Constantly. And you know, my grandmother is from an older generation where she was always just trying to survive. So things like mental health, right? Didn't exist. Or she didn't think they were real. She was just like, this is just life. I have to deal with my life. Yeah. And she had to be strong because she didn't have any other choice. So then when my mother was born and she grew into a young woman and she started dealing with mental health issues, she didn't have the vocabulary to even name what she was experiencing because my grandmother didn't have the tools to support her. How could, you know, it's just, I mean, like, we can talk about gaslighting when you tell somebody that what they're experiencing isn't real or they're crazy. And then that person is like, maybe I am crazy. Maybe something is wrong with me, you know? So as the eldest of my generation.
Are you an only child?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am too.
Yeah, I'd be a little nerdy girl reading lots of books. That's also probably why my imagination was crazy when I was little. So anyway, Also, just being an only child, I was really observant. You know, I would just
Yes.
watch my mom, I would watch my family, and I think, or rather, I know that had an impact on like the
Mhm.
kind of person that I am today.
Mhm.
And I always notice tension between my mom and my grandma.
Yeah.
There's like nobody who can make my mother more mad than my
And my
grandma.
grandma.
And likewise, I swear every month my grandmother is texting me, "Oh my God, Sarah, do you know what your mother said to me? I am not talking to her." And then I receive a text from my mom being like, "Hey, just want to let you know, me and grandma are kind of arguing right now." And I'm like, "What's new, you guys?" What's new? So I feel like for me, I am so ready and excited to love and support them, and to also just like accept and embrace their faults. There was a period of my life, like in my early 20s. I'm 32, about to be 33, y'all. But in my early 20s, when I wanted to like fix my family, do you know what I mean? I was like,
Yes.
if you guys just went to therapy, everything would be fine. But that's also the fact that I was coming into my own emotional literacy, and I thought that I knew everything. Nobody knows nothing at
No.
22, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, we know a lot. I don't want to like disparage young adults, but I at 22 was like pretty arrogant.
I think I know everything.
Exactly. And now I'm like, you know what? Actually, one of the best things I can do for my family is show them and tell them that I'm there for them, however they want to come to the table. You know, they don't got to be perfect. They can be yelling, whatever. I'm here for them.
Mm-hmm. No, like Tiana, the friend that I was with when we were watching, she really loved how you portrayed every character with like flaws in them, because I think we're so used to, again, like that whitewash, like perfect family and like everyone communicates, and just like, no, that's not what it's like in a Filipino household or in a BIPOC people of color like families. And I think my next question that ties into everything, because sometimes like when you're portraying these stories, sometimes people find it hard to believe because it's so unrealistic, but because they haven't lived the lives that we've lived, they're like, because like we understand it's realistic, but how do you like address like people who are like, oh, like there's no way your grandma killed your grandpa in the Philippines, or she was a gangster, or everything like that?
Yeah, those kinds of people who like respond that way to the show, I'm like, yeah, cool. You can think that. I got your money anyway. You know what I mean? You know, I'm not here to try to convince those people that my story is true or worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, people like you,
Mm-hmm.
like Tiana,
Mm-hmm.
like the folks who come to the show and suddenly feel like, oh, I'm seeing a part of my story on stage, even if I'm not a Filipino person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's who my play is, who it's meant for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, yeah, sure, you can totally watch it and think that it's not true,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not going to waste any of my time trying to convince you when I literally just put on a 2-hour like badass musical for you.
Mm-hmm.
I've done my work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that's how I deal with those people. I don't really deal with them. I'm like, okay, cool, thanks, bye.
Laughing my way to the bank.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. A two-parter to that question is, what was your reaction when your grandma was telling you these stories? Or like, were you finding yourself like those people like, grandma, you crazy? Like, that didn't happen.
Yeah, bro, of course. That was definitely a part of my response.
Yeah.
And then I was like, but what if it was true? What if you just sat here and received it and was encouraging to your grandma?
Mm-hmm.
Because for a long time, nobody really was. Because she would tell a different story of her past depending on who she was talking to on what day.
Mm.
Sometimes she'd be like, your mother's not my real daughter. She is my sister's daughter. I adopted her. And we're all like, what? What is going on?
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what, Sarah, just say yes and grandma, and see what happens when she tells you these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I've realized that, you know what, my play has not so much become about the actual hard and dry truth
Mm-hmm.
of what my grandmother's life was like,
Mm-hmm.
but it's become more of an exploration and a portrait
Mm-hmm.
of how a person copes
Yes.
with trauma, with pain, with loss,
Mm-hmm.
how a person tries to make amends in their life for their mistakes of the past,
Mm-hmm.
how we all create stories that are different versions of what we actually did in an attempt to heal ourselves and heal other people.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's way more interesting. You know what I mean? That's way more interesting. But I will tell you this, my grandma, she got a tattoo. She got a tattoo on her derriere, and I did some research. Found out that tattoo was a gang-affiliated tattoo. I used to see it all the time when I was little. You know, we go to like Chinese bathhouses. I'd be like, Grandma, what's that? She'd go, I tell you when you are old enough to understand. And yeah, this woman, I've seen her take down grown men. And she's like 5 feet, 130 pounds max, stomping on their necks with her heels at the bingo hall because they were harassing her and grabbed her butt when she walked by. Feel me? I've seen her throw her fucking fist through a window, part of my language, and break it. I've seen this woman get rageful. So it's really not that hard to believe that she was a badass.
No, that makes me like re-question my like relationships with my like grandparents of like, I don't know you aside from like you guys being my grandparents. Like, what kind of lives did you guys live in the Philippines?
It's true, man. You know, especially with our family, we see them in that context. Like, oh, you're my mom. Oh, you're my brother, you're my cousin. These people have whole lives outside of that role. And that's one thing that I always try to do as a storyteller is believe that and explore that. Because in that way, we can really give space for people to be their full selves, not just their mom. Like, before she was your mom, she was a whole other person. Maybe crazy, maybe amazing, maybe sad, right? And all of that has an impact on who we are today.
Okay. I didn't get to see Dragon Mama, unfortunately, because it was sold out. But what is like the difference between like Dragon Lady and Dragon Mom? I know you said that like it's stories of like your grandma and your mom, but like what would you say are like the challenges when doing each show?
Totally. So the form of each show is different. I like to call Dragon Lady an immersive cabaret. And what that really means is that when I'm playing my grandmother, I'm moving in and around the audience. I'm talking directly to you. I have cast you in the play. You're my grandchild. You're my favorite grandchild. You're Sarah Lee. So I'm actually interacting with you. There's no fourth wall between us. And that kind of intimacy really helps my grandmother's story soar, I think, versus if I didn't actually interact with you, the show would be very, very different. Feel me? With Dragon Mama, there's a very clear fourth wall.
Okay.
I play my mother, and it's almost as if you're watching a movie, like you're peeking into her life.
Okay.
And it feels, I think, really private. And also because Mama deals with mental health in a way that Lady doesn't. And because that's my mom, in many ways, that's the harder show for me to do emotionally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, I think this is just me trying to be like, what happens in Dragon Mama? Like, can you give a summary, please?
Yeah, totally. So we see my mom from ages about 8 years old to 24, 25. And we watch her journey from Bremerton, Washington to Anchorage, Alaska. Along the way, we see what it was like for her to grow up with an absent mother, how difficult that was. We see what it was like for her to have her first relationship with a woman and like realize that she was queer, but then also have that first relationship kind of go down the drain because that person gaslit her and was very like emotionally abusive towards her. And what it was like for her to have me with a man that she thought she was going to marry, my father, who ended up having like a wife and a kid back in Hawaii and totally didn't believe her when she was pregnant. So now we see her at the end of Act 1 with this baby, and she has no idea like who she is or what she's gonna do. And then postpartum hits her like a truck. And we see her struggling with her mental health, feeling like something's wrong with her, but feeling like she has nowhere to turn, not being able to even really take care of me. And then the end of Act 1 is pretty intense. She's locked herself in the bathroom while the rest of the family is outside banging on the door and telling her, like, don't do this, we're here for you. And we see my mother really just try to escape from her life. Act 2 opens in Anchorage, Alaska, and it's revealed to us that she has gone to Anchorage to work on the cannery boats there, which a lot of like API and Islander folks did because it's seasonal work and you can make a lot of money because you're not paying for housing because you're staying on the boat. And she decided she was going to do that because she wanted to make money so that she and I could move out of my grandma's house and start a life together.
Mm-hmm.
That was her first attempt at trying to break these cycles of trauma and trying to be an independent person.
Mm-hmm.
And while in Alaska, she meets Tina, my other mom, a Black American woman. They meet at like the only gay club in Anchorage. My mother falls in love automatically. Tina's an incredible singer. And my mother realizes that this woman is a different kind of person, someone who believes in her, who trusts her, who accepts her for all of who she is, even her flaws.
Doesn't gaslight her.
Exactly. And my mother is able to suddenly like, wow, believe in herself.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see me coming to Alaska and the three of us becoming a family and starting to do something different, like to make something better out of our family structure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That part about believing in yourself is such a like, that's a break it or make it moment. And I was also curious about this because at least in like the AAPI community, it's very like, what is it, like taboo to go into like theater, to go into anything arts related. But it sounds to me like were your grandma and mom like really supportive when you were doing theater and doing the work you're doing now?
Yeah, everybody was. My mom, my other mom, Tina's whole side of the family, my grandma, my aunties, my uncles, like everybody was like, you can do whatever you want to do. One time, my mom, when I was in high school and filling out like the FAFSA for college applications, she was like, Sarah, have you ever thought about becoming a pharmacist? And I was like, what? Where's this coming from? Why? She goes, because, you could work anywhere. The benefits are good. And I bet you could even have enough time to do theater on the side if you wanted to. And I looked at her and I was like, Mommy, I'm not going to be a pharmacist because one day I'm going to be a doctor on TV in a badass TV series. Okay.
Yes.
And she was like, yeah, okay. It was like literally the only time she ever tried to dissuade me from doing theater and my art. And Tina, my other mom, she comes from a creative family as well. And she's a musician on her own. And she would always go to all of my events. She would always hype me up. Yes. She would tell me to believe in myself. And it was really because of my parents that I'm able to have the confidence that I have now. Like even 4 years at a largely white institution didn't break me. Because I had parents telling me from the moment that I could, walk, that I was important, that I was special, that I had something to say.
We love to see the support from our parents.
I'd be emotional about it right now.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
It's okay.
We'll go into, I guess, like more cultural awareness and diversity. Tiana and I, and even Mas, when we were at the show last Saturday, we noticed how we were like the only people of color in the back, and how like everyone else was like a white American or just like a white race, right? And then you make this joke about like, oh, like in Dragon Lady, you make the joke of like, oh, well, like that's thanks to colonization because like the English because of the language. And I wanted to ask you, like, are you aware that sometimes like the audience isn't laughing at like what you're trying to make them? Because like we get the joke, but I think when we saw them laugh, we're like, why are you guys laughing? Like you're part of like the colonizers. Yeah.
It's interesting because the demographic of my audience when it comes to like their race and their racial background has changed over the years, and it changes night to night. And I remember when I first started writing Dragon Lady, I used to have my friends be like, are you worried that like white people aren't gonna like those jokes? And I was like, I don't care if they don't like the jokes. Like, so why would I care? Like if it's true, why would I not put it in?
Yeah.
So I've never really been concerned. You know what I mean? I've never been concerned about it. If they have an issue with my show, then they can leave at intermission. They can walk out. I've had people walk out of my shows before. I'm not pressed about it. I'm like, great. That's you establishing a boundary. If you don't want to be here, you should leave. Good for you. That's how I think about it. And when it comes to, it is what you said, right? Like, I think that in Seattle, I've seen like the white communities that I've moved in attempt and try to do the work when it comes to allyship and unpacking their own privilege. And that journey, right, is different for every person. I definitely have people in my community that I consider white allies, people that I trust, white folks, because I also know that white supremacy, while it benefits them, it hurts them too. It benefits and hurts us all in different, unique ways. So yeah, though, when it comes to, I literally waste no time and no energy being concerned about the issues that white people might have about my play. It's just like not even on my radar.
No, that's amazing, because I know like me and Tiana we kept like commenting, but like she also mentioned how like you again like you just don't care. And if they want to walk out, then they can walk out, or they can just not support you, and that just shows like where their priorities are at.
Exactly. You know, I trust everybody the second they walk into the space. I'm like, wow, y'all took the time to actually be here. That's fantastic. What happens after that? It depends. If they leave, I'm glad that they were there for the time that they were there, and I'm glad they made the decision to leave. If they stay until the end, fantastic. But again, their participation in the show, while important, because I do want people there, it doesn't hinge on them, you know?
Okay. I think another question that me and Tiana both had, I wish she was here. Like she was like just as starstruck as we are, but like what are you personally trying to do to bring like more diversity into like theater, or like to get more like youth like me and Tiana into spaces like theater? Because I think coming from like UW, like University of Washington, and being at like a very STEM based and like white institution, it's very much scary to do something that's not, you know, cliche, or something that's not conventional, because I'm very much unconventional. And yeah, like what are your tips, I'd say, to like people who want to pursue into like theater, or to anything arts related?
I would say first and foremost, consume. I know that sounds kind of weird, but it's like, if you want to do the thing, you should go and see the thing. You should experience the thing. Because while I was in college, it was just really hard to go out and see theater. And then when I would see theater, the shows that our school would like buy us tickets to, they were largely white. So for years, I didn't even know that there is and has been a rich AAPI theater community in Seattle. For years.
I didn't know that either.
Exactly. And I didn't know that. And that's a symptom of white supremacy. Well, it's that isolation, that loneliness that we feel in the face of white supremacy is not the reality. Okay. It's actually a symptom. They want us to think, white supremacy wants us to think that we're alone, so that we don't go out and find our peers, so we don't find our mentors, so that we don't keep the history alive. So that's what I would say first and foremost, is that any loneliness or isolation that you feel, try to unpack that, because that's not real. Well, it is a real emotional experience, yes, but try to think of it as a symptom of white supremacy. And one thing that you can do to combat that symptom is to go out and consume and research. You don't have to do it every day, right? Maybe you spend 5 minutes Googling like, oh, Filipino theater, Pacific Northwest. You're going to find some stuff. You know, maybe you're like, oh, I'm actually going to reach out to Sara Porkalob because I want to see if she has connections with so-and-so. I'm going to take 5 minutes to do that, right? So that's the first one. It's like consume and research. The second is when you are confronted in your personal or institutional relationship spheres, whether that be with friends, right, or at school, right, and you're confronted with narratives that oppress you or invisibilize you, practice during those times, practice articulating your truth and refuting those narratives. And that can look very different depending on each person. If you're in class and somebody says bada 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 and it's actually not true, you could just be like, that's not true. And then you don't actually have to engage after that, right? The fact that you even said it, that's not true, took up space, and other people heard it, and that's fantastic. That's practicing speaking your truth, right? If you find yourself really excited by something within your personal spheres or your institutional spheres, whether that be an artist that you just found, or a story or a play or a TV show, thank you. Follow that impulse, like research them, follow them, reach out to them. You know, I'll speak for myself. One thing that I've spent a lot of time doing the last 10 years in Seattle is fostering relationships, specifically through education. Like, I have led workshops at almost every single college in this town, virtual and in person. Cornish likes to use my name, even though I don't ever really interact with them again, but I interact with their students. And through my own work with the city and local governance, like, we have been implementing creative strategies around dismantling racism and specifically gender oppression. So follow your impulses, the things that excite you. Practice speaking up against the injustices and the narratives that are oppressive and harmful. And do your research. Consume. Those are like the 3 main tips that I would have for people.